Emotion Symphony here. Welcome back to my A to C build challenge. We're up to the letter H and today we're working on an historical heritage build. Going into this, I just knew I wanted to use a lot of details and I had a big white mansion type build in mind. I don't know if this would kind of fit a French sort of vibe. I did Google French chateaus and I took some inspiration from that. The actual build process of this was actually quite simple. Because of how the room system in The Sims 4 works, I was able to basically make just one wall with all the details and copy that as many times as I wanted. So I think this one wall piece that we're working on now, I end up using 8 times. What did take a lot of time was each time I cloned the wall, I still had to go in and fiddle around with all the details that was clipping weirdly and wasn't copied in the right place and all of that. This build is very long. It's the longest video on my channel, but the actual recording footage was over 10 hours long, and I didn't even record every part of the process. All in all, I think this build might have taken me over 12 hours. But it was really fun, and I'm really loving these bigger builds that I've been doing. And they probably aren't superior for gameplay, and price-wise, they're kind of unobtainable to the average sim. But the build process is just really fun. So I managed to squeeze 10 hours into 36 minutes. I even did some polls in a couple of Facebook groups, asking if people usually preferred one long video or having one build split into 2 videos. And the results were unfortunately pretty 50-50. So I ended up just kind of trying to squeeze it into one video, and I hope that's okay. I hope it's still easy-ish to follow the build and that it's not moving too fast. This build ends up costing over 1 million simoleons, and I didn't even try to make it expensive, it just ended up that way. Like I said, I end up copying a lot of this first part of the build and using it several times, and I love the symmetry of it. I feel like that makes it look even grander. And I don't know if the symmetry just kind of makes it look very planned, and that it's not been added onto and expanded over time, and I quite like that. I feel like this build is kind of saying, we had money to begin with, we have not had to extend this. This was all out of our pocket to begin with. The family who lives here, they have a lot of money, and they've always had a lot of money, and they're showing it. I played around a bit with platforms in both the front of the house and also the back of the house to add different pathways to and from the house. And I also lined, you can kind of see it on the front of the house there, I kind of lined each path with, it's actually custom content pool trims, but I ended up lining all the paths with it, and also on grass, I added the path and lined it, and that kind of helped with the fact that you can't put a fence towards the end of the lot in The Sims 4. So if I wanted to line the paths with a fence, I would have ended up with a gap towards the road, and I would not want that, but with these pool trims I could add them all the way. I don't know how many pool trims end up being on this lot in the end, but I will say my laptop did start to struggle towards the end of this. I had to reload my game a couple times because it just stopped loading the details on the trees, but I surprisingly did not really experience any additional lag. It was just a lack of details on a few of the things that kind of happened. I had so much fun with all these details though, and this was kind of a more is more build, which really fits my personality in a way. It just kept getting better and better the more I added to it. In real life it's usually kind of a problem for me, but in this case it was really good. Surprisingly though, for the scale of this build, the inside isn't that large. There are only 4 bedrooms in this house, and like, they're big bedrooms, but I kind of expected more. But the build is quite wide but skinny, so there's a lot of space that kind of just gets used to be corridors and hallways, which is what I wanted, because if you watch, like, for example, Bridgerton or something, where this kind of house style is shown, there's always this like really long corridor with large windows on one side of the house, and I wanted that here too. And we haven't gotten to that part in the build yet, but looking back at it now, I realize I probably put the corridor on the wrong side of the house, because the way I built it, the corridor, both upstairs and downstairs, has all its big windows towards the water, and all the bedrooms and the offices and all that face the road, and I should have probably done it the other way around. But I don't think I expected how much space that would actually take up from the rest of the house. So there are only 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms on the second floor. And on the main floor there will be 2 living rooms, an office, a library, a prep kitchen, and a big dining room. And the reason there's no kitchen on the main floor is because I put that in the basement, where I made sort of the servants area. So the servants area kind of has the kitchen, and obviously sleeping quarters for the staff, the bathroom for them, and then there's laundry, like a woodworking room, a couple storage rooms, and a little nectar cellar. So I end up making a separate entrance to the basement on the outside of the house, and there's also a staircase going from the basement and into the prep kitchen. Before I started this build, I kind of wanted to do something more Norwegian styled. There are a couple of like big mansion type builds in my area, and I wanted to kind of not replicate but take inspiration from those. But that's not what happened, because I kind of got so inspired by all the CC details that I had, and I could probably have still done one of those builds in my area that I wanted to do in the beginning, but I got carried away and that didn't happen. I also originally was wanting to do both a pool house and a greenhouse, but as the build was growing and growing and I realized how long it was taking me and how long the video was going to be, I decided against it. And there is a pool, but it's not a pool house with it, and I decided to just ditch the greenhouse. I'll make that in another video. I don't know if the furniture I go with and the wallpapers and stuff kind of fit the time period that this house could have been built in, but I felt like it kind of had the historic vibes that I was going for. And even custom content has its limits. I didn't want to go on a massive CC hunt to find something that I would only use in this build, so I decided to just work with what I had, and if it's not historically accurate, then so be it. And obviously the point of this A to C build challenge that I'm doing was to help with my builder's block, and it's definitely done that. But I also don't want to be so stuck on what each prompt means that I can have fun with it. So I tried to build an historical heritage sort of building, but it doesn't mean that it is historically accurate. And it's The Sims 4. The Sims 4 isn't even historically accurate, so I've skipped ahead a bit in the video now, because like I mentioned, I had to cut 10 hours into 36 minutes. But here you can see the back of the house where I have done all those paths and lined them, and I used platforms to make sort of elevated planters in the middle there, just to add a bit of height difference and some interest. And here is the romantic garden fountain. I love it. I think the romantic garden stuff pack has to be one of my favorite stuff packs, and it's definitely my favorite for gardens. Now I'm working on the pool, and I've added this really pretty pool covering to the back, and the pool trims that I've used to line all the paths finally got to do what they were supposed to do, which is line the pool. I spent a lot of time trying to get the entrance to the basement correct from the outside. It was a lot of pushing and pulling of roof pieces to make it work next to the foundation and platforms and all that. But I wanted to have a little roof piece over the entrance to make it less visible. And even after all this fiddling and pushing and pulling, when I started doing the basement and like making rooms and stuff down there, the stairs and the roof piece on the outside kept disappearing. So at one point I just moved them out of the way and I fixed it at the end. The wall height in the basement is as short as it can be. I raised the platforms in there to make it shorter, even shorter than the short wall heights. And I made these little openings to the outside so the windows could look out and have some natural light. And I thought it was really fun to use. I have some CC windows where there's a closed version and an open one. And I thought using an open window down here was kind of cool. And if you for some reason would want to download this house, my gallery ID is in the description. And you have to remember to check to allow custom content when you're searching for my builds. And also I did playtest the basement, so the walls are not too short for your adult Sims to go down here. The basement doesn't look as fancy as the rest of the house. It has these stone floors and untreated wood on the walls. But this is a working room. The staff is doing the cooking here, the family doesn't really come down here, and more importantly, maybe the guests don't come down here. But for the rest of the house, I did kind of try to stick to a almost pastel color palette. There was a lot of like pastel minty greens, and one of the bedrooms is a pastel yellow. The nursery has an interesting color palette of pinks and reds with some hints of green. I did some fun murals on a couple of the walls. So there's a mix of a lot of patterns and colors throughout the house. But I think my favorite rooms in this house ends up being the nursery and also the dining room. And when we're done with the basement, the dining room is the next room. Because this video was getting so very long, I wasn't able to keep in a recording of every single room. So there are a few rooms missing from the actual videos, but you will see them in the screenshots at the end of the video. I spent a lot of time just fiddling around with stuff in the basement. At one point there was a platform in here, and I ended up removing that because it was just in the way, and I considered an island, but then I realized I wanted a fireplace, and the only place I could put the fireplace was that wall where I had the island. This room just took me a long time, and as I'm sitting here right now recording this voiceover, I'm still editing. Even though I was kind of finished with this edit like a week ago, I'm still trying to shorten the amount of time we spend in the basement. These types of rooms are so hard to figure out how to edit, where I spend ridiculously long trying to figure out the layout of the room and how I want it to be. Because I go so much back and forth, and I usually try to cut out the pieces that don't stay, but sometimes they overlap with pieces that do stay. I'd never done a kitchen in a basement before though, and I do prefer to be more organized than I was here, but yeah, it just ends up taking longer than I wish it did. If you have any questions about the custom content I'm using, there's a list with the names of the creators I use in the description of the video. And if you're curious about a specific piece of content, you can leave a comment and I'll get back to you. But we are finally moving on to the dining room. And from that point forward, the rest of the house is not as fiddly as the basement. And with that, I feel comfortable leaving you, so Thank you for hanging out with me today. Please like and subscribe, it means a lot to me. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!